Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Tuesday, October 11th, 2022. My name is Emma Vigeland, in for Sam Seder, and this is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, David Dayen, executive editor of The American Prospect and friend of the show, on the political dynamics surrounding gas prices going into the midterms. Meanwhile, carnage in Kyiv and other Ukrainian cities outside of eastern Ukraine, where the fighting had kind of coalesced, after Russian forces struck civilian infrastructure in retaliation for the blowing up of the bridge to Crimea. At least 14 have been confirmed dead and 100 wounded. This is a deeply scary escalation by the invaders after a series of Ukrainian successes. In response, Biden spoke with Zelensky yesterday and will be providing air defense systems to Ukraine. The third largest rail union in the U.S. rejected the tentative agreement from weeks ago because there's still not enough protection for time off for sickness. A strike could happen if an agreement is not reached 5 days after Congress reconvenes in mid-November. Biden's NLRB is moving forward, I should say, with a rule change that could benefit millions of workers currently classified as gig workers. This would essentially change classification standards so that these workers would qualify as employees, meaning more wage protection, more benefits. Great move. Senate Foreign Relations Chair Bob Menendez, who has veto power over arms sales, is vowing to do just that in regards to sales to Saudi Arabia over the oil and gas price fixing. The Job Creators Network Foundation, a small business interest group, is now also suing the Biden administration over student loan cancellation. These are the same guys who sued to block vaccine mandates before, so this is where their heart lies. Pennsylvania gubernatorial candidate Doug Mastriano, the one friends with the anti-Semite who founded Gab, is under fire for, anti-Semitic dog whistles about the Jewish day school that his opponent's children go to. So that is, not shocking. The Mexican government has filed a lawsuit against 5 Arizona-based gun dealers, accusing them of participating in illegal weapons trafficking. And lastly, dozens have died in Central America due to intense rainfall from Tropical Storm Julia. Venezuela, Guatemala, and El Salvador have been hit thus far the hardest. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome to the show, everybody. It is a news day, a Tuesday. I like that one. And it's just me today. Matt is out. He's not feeling well. So just myself and Bradley today. Sorry that the show got started a little late. We're just two-handing it here. But in the fun half, because Sam will be with us on Thursdays, we have Matt Binder and Brandon Sutton, who will be joining us. Our Thursday crew is now coming over to Tuesday. And with the Tulsi Gabbard news of her officially Dem-exiting, plus Candace Owens defending Kanye's anti-Semitism, we have a doozy of a fun half for you. So definitely check that out, and we're excited to get that going. But let's talk about the debate between Tim Ryan and J.D. Vance last night, because this race for Ohio's Senate seat vacated by Rob Portman due to retirement is heating up, and not with much help from Democratic national groups. Tim Ryan has been running as a moderate, which these Democratic national groups should love. He did say Biden shouldn't seek re-election, but all of his positions have been like, I'm a centrist, I'm a moderate, and that's how he's been framing himself in the general. And Tim Ryan also has a lot of equity in his in the state of Ohio, having been a congressman for a long period of time, and I think he has a lot of relationships in the state that should terrify Republicans and J.D. Vance in particular. But Republican groups on the outside are supporting J.D. Vance with $30 million, pouring it in recently, where polling shows that they're basically tied. Tim Ryan has been better at fundraising, as I mentioned, but the national Democratic groups have not been backing him aggressively enough, in my opinion. This debate, I think, highlights some of the problems with J.D. Vance as a general election candidate. No appeal, and just some sort of venture capitalist Peter Thiel goon that has achieved prominence as Resistance Libs recommended Hillbilly Elegy, the book that he wrote, to everyone they knew to understand the Trump voter. Turns out J.D. Vance is the Trump voter, because that's who Republicans are. He wasn't the special kind of Republican that can go to cocktail parties and be respectable with the centrist Democrats, the one that they like to idealize and fantasize about. No, he's the same guy, because all of the Republicans are the same guy. And he exemplified that in the first debate between the two on Monday. Early voting starts in just days, so the stakes are incredibly high here. Here is the first part of this debate between Tim Ryan and J.D. Vance that we have a clip for you here, in which they discuss same-sex marriage protections, and J.D. Vance basically says, I do not support that. I do not support a federal codification of same-sex marriage rights.
Are you ready to support that bill? Why or why not?
Mr. Vance, we start with you.
Yeah, so I've come out against this bill, and I don't think it's actually about gay marriage. It's not about same-sex marriage or same-sex equality. Look, gay marriage is the law of the land in this country, and I'm not trying to do anything to change that. But if you look at the specific bill that's being proposed, it wouldn't just codify something that's already enacted in law. It would actually make it easier for both the government and a lot of private parties to sue religious organizations if those religious organizations don't comply with the dictates of the federal government. I'm a devout Christian, and I think it's important to protect religious liberty in this country. We remember about 10 years ago when the Obama administration, I'm sure supported by Tim Ryan, went after a group of Catholic nuns because that Catholic nunnery wanted to run its organization the way that confirmed with its religious beliefs. That should be okay in this country. And the problem with this legislation is it's going to unleash a wave of litigation against our churches, our religious organizations, our mosques, our synagogues, everything. That's why I don't think it's a great idea.
Thank you, Mr. Vance. Congressman Ryan, same question.
Yeah, I voted for that in the House of Representatives. I will support codifying that into the Senate. But only J.D. Vance can say that the bill that codifies same-sex marriage is not about same-sex marriage. Only JD. You're the only one, J.D. Vance, that can actually say that. It's unbelievable. The problem we have here is we have 15,000 marriages here in Ohio. And when you read Justice Thomas's opinion on abortion, which J.D. Vance wants to celebrate, it also included in there nullifying these marriages, and it also included in there getting rid of protections around birth control. This is what I'm trying to explain to Ohioans, that J.D. Vance is extreme on these issues. No exceptions for rape or incest. He called rape inconvenient. He said he denied it, but it's on tape. right? Now he says he's not for same-sex marriage. He's going right down the line with the absolute most extremists, the guys who want to ban books and everything else. Those are the guys you bring into the state to campaign for you, JD. These are extreme positions that Ohioans are rejecting.
That was a really good response. I mean, he started off, I was like, how is he going to bring this home? But bringing it back to abortion, understanding that this extreme religious theocratic impulse is one and the same with the one that tries to control women's bodies and the one that supports the overturning of Roe v. Wade. There's a reason that J.D. Vance's twin flame in Arizona, Blake Masters, had to scrub his website for his primary position on abortion, which was a lot more extreme than the one that he's advertising now. And hey, that guy's down 10 points versus the incumbent Kelly in Arizona. And so you have to connect all of these things together. When Vance is trying to talk about nunneries and whatever garbage that has no salience and is so specific and just bizarre in his story hour there, you have to make it more tangible. And Tim Ryan does just that there. So when we're talking about codifying same-sex marriage protections, we are also talking about abortion because of that Thomas Thomas opinion that was added to the rolling back of abortion rights. He provided a blueprint for right-wing groups throughout the country to do the same for issues like gay marriage. And so that's the same reason why Ron Johnson in Wisconsin does not have a better answer for his lack of support for a same-sex marriage bill being codified by the Senate, except to say, oh, well, it's unnecessary. It's not going to happen. Well, I mean, you said that. You guys said that for a long time about abortion. You said it, and all of the Supreme Court justices who rolled back abortion rights said it when they were in their confirmation hearings. It's settled law, it's settled law, it's settled law. Not so much. But here's the second part of that we wanted to highlight from this debate last night, where, of course, J.D. Vance decides to kiss Trump's ass in a sloppy and public way. Well, I guess he has been trying to do that, I should say. This is Tim Ryan really calling him out on it in the middle of the debate.
Like just a few weeks ago in Youngstown, on the stage, Donald Trump said to J.D. Vance, all you do is kiss my ass to get my support. He said that. That's bad, because that means J.D. Vance is going to do whatever he wants. Mitch McConnell's given him $40 million. He's going to do what he wants. And Peter Thiel gave him $15 million. He's going to do what he wants. And here's the thing that's most troubling about this lack of courage is that after Trump took J.D. Vance's dignity from him on the stage in Youngstown, J.D. Vance got back up on stage and started shaking his hand, taking pictures, saying, hey, aren't we having a great time here tonight? I don't know anybody I grew up with. I don't know anybody I went to high school with that would allow somebody to take their dignity like that and then get back up on stage. We need leaders who have courage to take on their own party. And I've proven that. And he was called an ass kisser by the former president.
Yeah. Cucked. Hey, look, this is I think Tim Ryan is doing a really bang up job with the way that he's attacking J.D. Vance. He's going after his complete sham of a nonprofit as well, which I believe we might have headlined yesterday, but we can talk more about that. And then calling him a weak person who's essentially kissing Trump's ass and caving to him in that way. It's effective because it's true, especially because of what I described earlier, which is that J.D. Vance was against Trump until it was inconvenient for him. And now he's got to bend the knee and kiss the ring. And that kind of weakness does not play. And would I prefer a more progressive candidate than Tim Ryan in an ideal world? 100%. But this is the campaign that we have. And in terms of the offensive instincts in the way that he's gone after J.D. Vance, connecting abortion and gay marriage, basically mocking him for his beta posture to Trump, Those are good tacks to take.
It's textbook Midwestern campaigning.
Yes.
Just constantly saying the guy's name over and over again. He is augmenting his Ohio Yinzer accent very prominently in this debate, and also I just appreciate how he was like, if someone said that I was kissing their ass, all of my friends would beat them up. he's basically like JD Vance didn't even stand up to it. We would have been like, I don't kiss anybody's ass. Like,
yeah, right. Not a tough guy.
Yeah, it's just pure bravado and masculinity. It also just goes to show like how hilarious it is when people think that the mainstream Democratic Party is like the radical left, so to speak. Like, just take Tim Ryan. Like, this is what the Democrats in Ohio want to be representing them in the Senate. At least the infrastructure. I mean, like the party wants that, like Tim Ryan.
Well, you can support abortion rights and still call him like a soy boy. Essentially, that's
the playbook. Exactly.
Right. That's what Tim Ryan's going with. So I wish that the National Democratic Party was and the fundraising infrastructure was giving more attention to this race because of the potential flips that we're seeing. I mean, who are we? Of flips, the one that's most likely is Featherman. I still think that, yes, that's another seat where Toomey's vacating it, but in terms of flipping it from red to blue, I think that that's the most likely. But is this the next most likely flip? Probably.
Yeah, it would probably be this or Wisconsin, I guess. Yeah, but like you said, these are two, like, I would probably compare it more to Pennsylvania just because it's two open seats as opposed to an incumbent running. So, yeah, I think in terms of open seats, definitely this after Pennsylvania, which is, like, honestly probably not what I would have anticipated coming into
given
the
how
race,
Ohio has trended so red.
Oh, yeah. Especially, like, in 2018. Like, there was just no victories for statewide Dems in Ohio in 2018.
But this is an example of a bad candidate versus a candidate who's been in the political infrastructure, and people in Ohio know who Tim Ryan is. And I don't understand why the fundraising apparatus on the national level doesn't recognize it, since Tim Ryan's been one of them for a long period of time. But hopefully the fact that there were some headlines about that and what's happening with this debate recently, maybe they come in at the 11th hour and help him out. Maintaining the Senate is paramount, as we all know. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we will be joined by the great David Dayen. We are back, and we are joined by the wonderful David Dayen, executive editor of the American Prospect and a friend of the show. David, thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Emma.
Well, I like to suck up to our guests so that they keep coming back. Although I don't know if we have that problem with you, because you're pretty damn reliable.
I am here to fulfill the dark hair and glasses element of the show that needs to be part of it on a daily basis.
It is contractually required, so yes. I appreciate you filling in. You wrote a piece about oil prices, and I want to dive fairly deep into some of the dynamics surrounding this. Just talk a bit about how gas prices are rising, right? A lot of people are drawing a direct connection to OPEC Plus's price fixing, and that's part of the story for sure. But can you first explain the how we got here to our audience in terms of why OPEC made this decision, what went into it in terms of the dynamics involving Russia's invasion of Ukraine, how they were able to do so within the bureaucracy of OPEC, and basically how it's really just the Saudis calling the shots here.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, you have to go back to the outbreak of the invasion of Ukraine. And that clearly led to a large spike in oil prices, just on the belief that this would be disruptive to global oil markets. There were sanctions that were put on Russia, on Russian oil, the purchase of Russian oil. Russia has been able to sort of leak out to other countries and continue their sales in such a way that the spike initially from March, April, May, June started to subside. And we actually had something like 99 straight days of oil price reductions in the United States. That's because those expectations that that oil would be taken off of global markets and then there would be a supply crunch turned out to be somewhat unfounded, because Russia was able to find other partners and other purchasers. And as that recognition drew in, you saw prices drop. But it's kind of snuck up on people, because that was sort of the dominant story. And actually, you can plot Biden's approval rating against the oil price drop of the previous that 100 days, and it's pretty consistent. But it hasn't sort of dawned on people that, particularly in certain areas of the country, prices have gone back up. I'm here in California, and we're now at a price level that's higher than it was at the peak in the summer of this year, in June. And that had a lot to do with refinery capacity. So, I don't think the OPEC decision has factored into global markets just yet. I mean, maybe a little bit at the margins over the last week. But what we're really seeing when you're looking at real gas prices rising in places like the Midwest, Pacific Northwest, and California is refinery capacity. So we've had like 7 out of 17 refineries down for maintenance. And that maintenance is supposed to subside sometime around November, which is very interestingly timed, right? There was a refinery fire at a big refinery in Ohio that brought that down. Basically, and I wrote about this way back in June. This is sort of the hidden driver of gas prices. When you have refinery capacity loss, because our refinery portfolio is so constricted, so concentrated, there just aren't that many refineries that are out there. Any kind of disruption, particularly like, multiple refineries going, being taken offline, is going to cause price spikes. And there's not a whole lot that can be done in the short term about that. It takes time to build a refinery and get it up to capacity. Basically, what happened is that there was a sort of expectation level, both because of the pandemic and the crash in oil prices, the crash in the usage of oil, and the expectation that, okay, we're going to move to electric cars. What is the reason to build a new refinery now if we're going to move in this direction? That has created this concentration and this lack of capacity in refineries. And, as I've been told, there's not much distinction to be made between, a refinery saying, oh, we have a glitch, and a refinery just, hey, we're going to take this offline because, for whatever reason, we don't like the political folks in power right now. We want to punish them. Or, that's certainly the case with OPEC, right? And it extends to the refinery space as well. So those are some of the factors going on.
Well, I mean, in your piece, you put refinery problems in quotes, right? Which is, it's so necessary to frame it with this kind of side eye, because none of these problems are really named. It's quite it's quite obscure, and I understand that Gavin Newsom has been trying to combat this with this blend of oil,
I'll briefly
cheaper oil.
describe that.
Do you mind doing so? Yeah.
There's a summer blend and a winter blend, and the difference is that in the summer blend it burns a little less intensely, and so they use that in the summer because demand for gasoline, frankly, is higher in the summer, and the winter blend is a little more toxic, but it's also cheaper to produce. So what Newsom did is he moved up. Usually that transition happens in November, and he moved it up to October in the hopes that because that's cheaper to produce and easier to produce, that you could get more capacity out of the winter blend and thereby hopefully lower gas prices. There are also checks that are going out in California, rebates for gas. I mean, it's just money. You can use it for anything, but it's been framed in this way that this is because of the high gas prices. So folks are getting anywhere from up to, I believe, $1,000. Basically, every taxpayer in California is going to get this rebate. So there's some things happening in California to try to mitigate this. But yeah, I mean, you just don't know. It's always very vaguely described in terms of, oh yeah, the refineries are down. And then you look over and gas has gone up by 60 cents or 80 cents a gallon. This happens perpetually in California. But right now, the disconnect between national prices and prices in California are at their highest level. So clearly, it does seem like there's some shenanigans going on.
So, from a national coverage of gas prices right now, I mean, I know Bob Menendez is essentially saying that he's going to veto all arms sales to Saudi Arabia because of OPEC Plus making this decision, and it's right now being framed as a problem with Saudi Arabia and their price gouging us, which is true, right? And I'm sure that they're making their own political determinations. Biden's fist bump was not the best move. We can talk about that as well. But little attention is paid to political calculations made by the petroleum industry, probably based on who's in power and their ability to move poll numbers just by their refinery capacity. And I wonder if at one point we'll have a whistleblower come out and say, this is what boardroom discussions were like when we had a Democratic president in power or a Democratic governor.
It would be interesting.
Yeah,
it would be
right.
Interesting to know. I mean, it is striking the connection between the price of gasoline, and which is only one price that we pay in the economy, right? But it's the one that's actually posted billboard style for everyone to see every time you drive around, right? Every time you're outside, you see the big gas prices, and it's sort of this psychological indicator of how the economy is doing in kind of an unwise way, but it's undeniable. Like you can't say that it doesn't have an impact, because it's very obvious when you look at, you just plot gas prices against approval ratings or the generic ballot or things like that. And we have seen, even nationally, gas prices move about 20 cents or something in the last month. It's smaller than the serious increases when gas was around $5 a gallon in the beginning of the summer. But now we're pushing $4. And if that keeps going up in the next month, who knows what happens? So I do think that more attention needs to be paid to this problem. The Biden administration has certainly done something by releasing oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, but there's they seem a little stuck on the refining issue. I mean, there aren't a lot of good answers there, frankly. And so, I mean, we'll just have to wait and see. There was some talks that the Biden administration engaged in with Venezuela, apparently.
That was my next question.
To try to release some oil there. Obviously, there's the Iran situation, which is very volatile right now because of the protests in that country. I don't think we're going to see an Iran deal, a nuclear deal, in the near future, which also would have freed up some oil resources. So it's hard to know where to go.
Right. And I mean, do you mind fleshing out what's happening there with potentially phasing out some of the sanctions against Venezuela, which should happen regardless of oil production? But now Chevron should be able to pump in Venezuela, and maybe that kind of releases some of the pressure out of the situation. But
that's a theory, yeah.
That could, but talk a bit more about the Biden administration's move towards potentially doing that.
Yeah, I mean, that is the theory that if you ease up on the sanctions to the degree that Chevron can go in there and restore that production, that would release pressure. But again, there's a time lag there, right? Venezuelan oil facilities are in no condition right now to be pumping at a high rate and exporting that across the globe. So that's going to take time, and time is sort of the enemy of the administration. All of this should be put into the context that we have a burning planet right now, and I mean, we're talking about where are we going to get oil from here or there, and how are we going to reduce gas prices? And it cuts at it's across purposes with the ultimate goal of getting to net zero energy by 2050. So all of these things have to be put sort of into that context. And obviously with the Inflation Reduction Act, there is a lot of money being put into trying to reduce our carbon footprint. That is one of the better ways, rather than to continue sort of the tyranny of single occupancy vehicles. One of the better ways is to diversify our transportation such that we're not burning all this carbon, or even in the electric vehicle context. I think it's certainly more efficient to do it through mass transit or things like that.
Well, yeah, I mean, that is something that maybe from a messaging perspective, because of course, something that's even less immediate in terms of affecting gas prices for the midterms is the transition to clean energy and what that would do for oil prices. So that would be more of something we need to do, yes, and move towards. But from Biden's perspective, with the election coming up, that's more, I would say, a messaging ploy, or should be, that this kind of, if they want to play these games and they want to raise prices in order to affect my political futures, allegedly, then we need to. This is why we need to make that transition, and I feel like they need to get ahead of that.
I think that is a good way to message it, and a necessary way. I mean, Biden has to play, like all presidents do at this point, a kind of a double game. He's got to talk in the short term about people's pocketbooks and making sure that people aren't being gouged and paying exorbitant rates just to get to their job or to get their kids to school or whatever. But he also has to talk at the same time about the long term and about ultimately this myth that energy independence would finally break these shackles for us. Well, we are energy independent. We the United States is a net exporter of hydrocarbons, of petroleum, and yet this problem persists because it's a global market, and fluctuations happen because of events that happen globally. So this whole idea that if we just pumped enough oil here to get energy independent, then we could cut ourselves off from the rest of the world, that was a myth. And the only way to move forward in the long term is to move to a clean energy economy that doesn't make us dependent on events happening that are out of our control.
Right. I mean, the idea that domestic drilling is in some way increasing our United States energy independence is so silly, because at the same time we're talking about a global economy with complex and often very flimsy trade relationships and supply chains, and yet by the same token, we're some of these politicians are still making the claim that this is somehow sovereign or between our within our borders. Hey, if we want to be truly energy independent, let's nationalize these companies, right? Then we're getting serious about United States energy independence.
Yeah, I mean, and that's not such a bad idea, right? I mean, if you're thinking about this issue where you have this industry that we do need to produce, and actually maybe even produce more in the short term, but we absolutely need to turn off those spigots over time so that we're not burning an excessive amount into the atmosphere such that we raise global temperatures and cause sea level rise and things like that. The best way to do that is to take over the management and organization of that entity, because that's the only thing that's going to truly put it in the control of the national security and habitability interests of the United States and of the world. So the idea that we actually need to nationalize the oil companies is really not far-fetched, and we've written about it, Prospect, and it makes sense because of this sort of push-pull, this sort of short-term, long-term dichotomy that we have with respect to oil and gas.
Let's talk a bit about the midterms while I have you, David, because we just played two parts of the debate last night between J.D. Vance and Tim Ryan. And news today that I was reading, I think NBC News was reporting about how these national Democratic groups have kind of not given J.D. Vance, but Tim Ryan the support that they're giving to other Democratic candidates across the country. And I'm surprised by that, given Tim Ryan's history as a Democratic member of Congress, and the fact that he's not running a socialist campaign. He's running as a centrist Democrat, and the polls are pretty tight. What do you think that disconnect is there between the National Democratic fundraising apparatus, or I guess campaign funding apparatus, and his campaign?
This is always the time of year where you hear these stories of, every candidate who thinks they have a shot thinks that they're not getting enough support from national Democrats, right? But I do think what you see with respect to the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee, the DSCC, and Senate Majority PAC is if anything, there's a bias towards incumbents. So Democrats have a lot of threatened incumbents. And if you sort of just plot that and look at the chart, they're getting a lot of money, a lot more money than challengers. Even people like John Fetterman, even people like Mandela Barnes and Sherry Beasley, Val Demings, Tim Ryan. Where you're really seeing the money go is to try to save Mark Kelly, is to try to save Catherine Cortez Masto and Maggie Hassan and Raphael Warnock. And the problem is that Democrats have a lot of potential losses. I mean, they have a large playing field to deal with. And, those calculations that are made, they're imperfect. So, if I was looking at it, for me, Ohio, based on polling, based on, candidate quality, it does look like Ohio might be a better bet than Wisconsin right now. But that's a subjective thing. That's like a judgment call. I think North Carolina, where you have someone who's won statewide, who outpolled Biden in 2020, even though she lost by 400 votes in Sherry Beasley when she was running for state Supreme Court, versus a House member, but not an incumbent senator in an open seat race, where that race, no polling has shown more than a 1 point or 2 point edge between either candidate, I think that might be a better bet than something like Wisconsin, which seems to be slipping away. But the real problem is that Republicans are outraising and outspending from outside money more than Democrats in virtually every Senate race. The only Senate race I can think of is the Mark Kelly-Blake Masters race, where Blake Masters is basically deprived of any money. But every other race, the Republican arm of the Senate, their campaign committee, and their associated super PAC are outspending Democrats by millions of dollars in virtually all of these races. I think that's the larger issue.
Well, I saw a poll the other day in Wisconsin where it was 50-49 and much closer than you describe with Mandela Barnes versus. So, but I'm curious why you feel it's slipping away a little bit. Maybe just I'm remained immensely frustrated that Schumer never brought up that gay marriage bill for a vote. Why the hell did he allow the bipartisan group of senators to negotiate a religious liberty exemption for weeks on end and then let the Senate go on recess, essentially, where he could have forced that vote, which would have been very difficult for Ron Johnson to defend in Wisconsin? And of course, you can't draw a direct connection to any of these things, but it would have helped, in my opinion. It definitely would have helped.
Yeah, I think that was a mistake. I agree with you. I certainly there was that more recent poll that did show a closer race, but polls prior to that did show Johnson moving ahead. There's been, Barnes has just been pummeled, particularly on the crime issue, around his support for bail reform, which, is bogus, but it hasn't really been answered on the air, right? And I think what Barnes has been doing with his own personal advertising has been a little bit weak. But I think that you have to make tough choices if you're outspent and outraised. You have to concentrate your resources at the end of a campaign cycle, and you have to figure out, okay, who's in the best position to win? Who's in the best position to give us what we need? And I think there are pretty strong cases for Ohio and North Carolina. Maybe there's a strong case for Wisconsin too, but I think, being able to cover all of that is going to be difficult for Senate Democrats. So they're going to have to figure out, who to stay and who to go. And right now that seems to be Tim Ryan. Like, they're letting him sort of float on his own.
You mentioned the Fetterman race, and it's been a little concerning to see these polls tightening. I know sometimes this stuff happens, and I can't imagine that the last news cycle, if it's penetrated, of Dr. Oz standing in front of a Nazi car at a fundraiser and killing dogs for experiments. Like, I mean, what do you think is happening with those polls tightening in Pennsylvania? Because that's got to be concerning.
I mean, I think part of it is sort of reversion of the mean, Republicans coming home and saying, well, I'll vote for the Republican. Over the last 2 years, we've seen voter registration, prior to Dobbs, we saw voter registration higher in Pennsylvania on the Republican side than on the Democratic side. That might have shifted with Dobbs, but after this June, but that certainly was the trend. And, Fox News has adopted this race. Nobody is getting more airtime on Fox News than John Fetterman, talking about his tattoos and whether they're, pay-ins to the Crips, or talking about his record on crime and being lenient and letting people go on the parole board as lieutenant governor. There have been tons of stories on Fox about Fetterman, and that obviously plays, it feeds into the conservative ecosystem, the bloodstream. And, that's difficult. That's going to be difficult for anyone to work its way out of. But, that being said, all those polls still show Fetterman in the lead, right? So he had a pretty good cushion. The top of the ticket is a disaster for Republicans, with Mastriano losing by double digits. That's going to feed down into the Senate race, I feel. I still am fairly bullish on Fetterman making it through.
All right. Well, from your mouth to God's ears. Last question before I let you go. You mentioned how they're hitting him on crime over and over again. This is the toehold that it seems like the Republicans have, they were struggling inflation, and at the beginning of the year we're talking about potato head being genderless, but
right.
Now they've zeroed in on crime, and it actually seems to be pretty effective in some of these races. What's been your observations on that strategy?
Yeah, they've really gone all in on that. The majority of Republican ads that are out there are on the crime issue. It's interesting, right? Because they said they were going to, run on inflation and the Biden economy, and then gas prices went down a little bit, and they went right back to Willie Horton territory. This is a pretty. It's such a common Republican tactic that you'd think by now, after 40 years, that Democrats would have invented or established some sort of meaningful parry to it, but they never seem to. And we are seeing a lot of Democratic ads with cops supporting, or like the local sheriff saying, "I endorse this Democrat," or whatever. I don't know that totally works. There just has not been a successful counter to that attack, and that's why that's why Republicans keep using it, because there doesn't seem to be a very successful counterattack to that strategy, and Democrats need to come up with one.
They're terrified, and then if the only time they're ever addressing it is when they're crapping on the left for their position on it. But what's your guys' position on it, except for running from the issue? That's what's so immensely frustrating.
Yeah.
But anyway, David, I really can't thank you enough for coming on. As always, great stuff. Executive editor of The American Prospect, and you can check. You have to. If you are listening to the show and you don't read The American Prospect regularly, I don't know what you're doing. So thanks so much, David. Really appreciate it.
All right. Thanks a lot, Emma.
All right, guys. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll do another clip and then wrap up the first hour of this program. Be right back. We are back. Emma Vigeland in for Sam Seder, who is soon to be or is currently on a plane to Vegas for the TORT conference. He'll be joining us on Thursday and Friday, I believe. Right, Bradley? Thursday and Friday, Sam will be on. And Matt Leck, as I mentioned, not feeling well. So Bradley and me today, me and Bradley and I, who gives a shit? But we will be joined by Matt Binder and Brandon Sutton shortly. Our Thursday crew will be swapping out for Tuesday in just a second. But I wanted to touch on this clip from Donald Trump at his rally in Nevada over the weekend, which we weren't able to get to yesterday, because he's just leaning into the most insidious, dangerous elements of his fan base. We've mentioned on the show a number of times how he's been playing that fan music created by QAnon folks, where we go one, we go all, playing the creepy orchestra music behind his rallies as a nod to the QAnon folks in the audience. But he also is now lionizing and mythologizing January 6th and the coup attempt that he participated in, as well as his fellow associates and his supporters, basically egging them on. This is what he said in Nevada on Saturday.
I never knew the cameras, because this took place right from, they never want to show how massive our crowd was. You know the biggest crowd I've ever seen? January 6th. And you never hear that. It was the biggest, and they were there largely to protest a corrupt and rigged and stolen election. It's the biggest crowd, and you never hear that. And you see very...
I mean, it's not the biggest crowd. We know the numbers. It was in the hundreds of thousands, but we also can, right? It was like hundreds of thousands of people, and then some thousands stormed the Capitol.
I like that he says that we never hear it. Like, nobody talks about people assailing the Capitol en masse. Yeah, no one ever talks about it.
We're pretty sure that people, it's discussed in, the criminal hearings and the indictments that have been handed down of the people who stormed the Capitol and tried to overturn the democratic results of an election on January 6th. We've heard about that. There have been primetime hearings, but no one was talking about how it was the biggest crowd that anyone's ever seen, because that's not the case. He made this claim about his inauguration. We know that Obama's was much bigger. Whatever. It's just him stroking his ego and his capacity to lie. As it just is. It's incredible to witness in a really dark way. But the thing about Trump is, I am convinced he's going to run and he's going to announce after the midterms. And where do you go from this point, where you have gone even further? He's been inching towards essentially just saying, "I am Q" on stage, and having everyone in the audience, throw their bras and panties on stage like he's like a damn Beatle or something like that. I mean, he's giving the fans what they want with every step of the way, his most dogmatic supporters. And the cult of personality element just keeps getting stronger and stronger, even if his broader appeal is weakening. But to get out of a primary, that's what you need. You need intense fans. And unlike, I think having that kind of support in the Democratic Party, he has broader appeal, say, in the Republican Party than any Democratic candidate who had, even take Bernie, for example, who had a lot of energy behind him and a lot of passionate supporters. It's just a different dynamic in the Republican Party, especially when he's a former president. There are way more MAGA Republicans in the Republican Party than there are lefty Democrats in the Democratic Party to support someone like Bernie Sanders, because Trump has essentially taken over the whole party. And I have grown, and this is just my gut, telling me how I feel like things are going to shake out, but my gut says that DeSantis doesn't have it. My gut says that guy is burning too fast to sustain himself in the Republican primary. He's throwing everything in the kitchen sink in terms of publicity stunts and putting himself front and center and sucking up to conservative media members. And he's doing it quite early. You could say he's building goodwill. But I just feel like once the primary begins, people are going to want the real thing. And that's Donald Trump. And then we're having a conversation about this guy being back in power, with supporters who are completely disconnected from reality, even more so than when he first won the presidency in 2016. Anti-democratic fascist fan bases who are angry and radicalized. And he's going to have them behind him and be the front runner for the presidential nomination for the Republican Party. And we have to begin to start to think seriously. Like, he's funny in his own bizarre way. He says weird things. He intonates at times that make no sense, and you never know what the hell this guy's gonna going to talk about, and there's some humor in that. But that's where the humor ends, because the prospect of him getting back into power should really terrify everybody, and it certainly terrifies me. With that said, though, now we turn to the fun half. Got to be fun in the fun half. We don't need to talk about the collapse of our society much longer. We're going to have more... Well, that will be part of it. But here's Matt Binder. While we're setting up his shot, let me just give you our ESVN plug, because yesterday Bradley and I had a mega episode which included Dave Zirin coming on to talk about his new documentary. We recapped the 2 massive wins for the New York teams in the New York Giants and the Jets. Talked about the firing of Matt Rule and how that was more symptomatic of David Tepper's incredible over-aggressiveness as an owner, and much more. Micah Parsons being Defensive Player of the Year, in my opinion. Plus, just talk about, could we see more collective ownership? What are the barriers for that? We discussed that with Dave Zirin, as well as the differences in the structures of the NFL and NBA, which leads to the NBA being a lot more progressive than that of the NFL. Check us out on youtube.com/ESVN show and on Apple and Spotify podcasts. Here we go. Boom. Hello, guys.
Hello. How are you?
It is Tuesday, and yet you are here. Hello.
Hello.
How are you? What's going on?
I'm doing well.
What's caused this time warp?
Well, Sam is going to be on Thursdays because he's flying to Vegas today, and so we had to leave the afternoon open for the show's namesake. But what's happening, guys? What's happening on Scam Economy? What's happening on Doomed, Binder?
I can't tell you because it's too early in the week.
Oh, damn!
I could tell you that check out youtube.com/Matt Binder, where I live stream. I could say go to doomedcast.com for the podcast version of Doomed. Go to scameconomy.com for the podcast version of Scam Economy. Also, though, tonight, instead of the usual Doomed live stream that I do, I've been invited on the live stream show Movie Night Extravaganza. To do, I know they're friends of the show too, the Majority Report, and the Michael Brooks show from back in the day. And tonight we'll be talking about the horror classic Return of the Living Dead, one of my all-time favorite zombie movies, horror movies. It's a wonderful one. So we'll be talking about that tonight. I'll post a link on the YouTube page in the community section where you could post links and stuff. So anyone wants to tune in, youtube.com/Matt Binder tonight.
Binder, how was chatting with Vosh and Dylan Burns?
Oh, right. Yeah. So, yeah. You want to save this for the second half of the show?
Yeah, sure.
Let's save it. Yeah.
Yeah, you can check that out at youtube.com/Matt Binder as well.
All right. Excellent. The discourse, Brandon. What's up with that?
I also wasn't expecting what's up with that. That's the perfect way to refer to my show. But no,
yeah.
I also wasn't expecting to be here today. But you can catch the discourse on all the usual channels.
Being shadow banned. Well, poor Brandon. All right. We'll also say Matt in absentia. Check out Left Reckoning. It should be on tonight. I'm not sure if he's feeling up to it because Matt's out sick today, guys. I don't know if you heard the news, but feel better, Matt, and check out Left Reckoning for sure. All right, guys. We'll be taking your calls in the fun half, 646-257-3920. See you there.
3 months from now, 6 months from now, 9 months from now, and I don't think it's going to be the same as it looks like in 6 months from now, and I don't know if it's necessarily going to be better 6 months from now than it is 3 months from now, but I think around 18 months out, we're going to look back and go like, wow. What is that going on? It's nuts. Wait a second. Hold on for a second. Emma, welcome to the program.
Hey.
Matt.
What is up, everyone?
Nomi Key.
You did it. Let's go, Brandon.
Let's go, Brandon.
Bradley. Bradley, you want to say hello?
Sorry to disappoint everyone. I'm just a random guy.
It's all the boys today.
Fundamentally false.
No, I'm sorry. Women's
Stop talking for a second and let me finish.
Where is this coming from, dude?
But dude, you want to smoke this 7A?
Yes.
Hi, me? This me?
Yes.
Is this me?
Is it me?
It is you.
Is this me? Hello, is this me?
I think it is you. Who is you? No sound. Every single freaking day. What's on your mind?
Sports. We can discuss free markets and we can discuss capitalism.
I'm gonna go start watching.
Libertarians. They're so stupid, though. Common sense says, of course.
gobbledygook.
We fucking nailed him.
So what's 79 plus 21?
Challenge met.
I'm positively quivering.
I believe 96, I want to say.
857-210-501. 1/2. 3/8.
9/11, for instance.
$3,400, $1,900.
6, 5, 4, $3 trillion sold. It's a zero-sum game.
Actually, you're making me think less of it.
But let me say this. Poop.
You can call it satire. Sam goes, it's satire.
On top of it all, my favorite part about you is just like every day, all day, like everything you do.
Without a doubt. Hey, buddy, we see you. All right, folks.
It's just the weak being weeded out, obviously.
Yeah, sun's out, guns out. I don't know.
But you should know.
People just don't like to entertain ideas anymore.
I have a question. Who cares?
Our chat is enabled, folks.
I love it.
I do love that.
Look, gotta jump. Gotta be quick. I gotta jump.
I'm losing it, bro.
2 o'clock. We're already late, and the guy's being a dick. So screw him. Sent to a gulag?
Outrageous.
Like, what is wrong with you?
Love you, bye.
Love you. Bye-bye.
We're back. They're back. We're always talking right up until the last second. Someone IM'd and asked me if this was a beer. I'm not drinking a beer in the morning. It's